come across people who love talking about themselves, and it's quite draining. Fast tracking that journey for success.
How do we actually build a legacy brand?
That's a big question. Make a plan, write it down.
Jock, welcome to the show.
Thank you, mate. It's great to be here.
Mate, you've been a role model of mine for many years, both in the business sense and also, you may not know, a role model as a father and a father figure.
Thank you.
You've also been a source of inspiration for many of the aspiring entrepreneurs in the construction industry here in SA and probably around the country, whether you know it or not. And we've had many conversations from scaling up my business to other people's business models, to the private versus public school sector dilemma, and everything in between. Today, I want to dig a little bit deeper into how you've built a legacy and what it takes to remain at the top of the game. I've handpicked some quotes. Some are yours, some are others. This one is about winning in the weeds.
Yeah.
Everything we do is considered and treated with design sensitivity. Every angle, every joint, every surface, and every finish. How important are the one percenters? Yeah,
the one percenters are something that my team gets tired of me talking about, to be frank. Like, to me, one percenters is, in some part, what I think's got us to where we are today. I think in some part it probably helps us to be elevated above potentially our competitors. To me, one percenters are about, I default to building when I think one percenters, but it's not just that. But it's in our sales, it's in our design, it's in our marketing. I think the one percenters are ultimately the key that leads to success, but also continues to reward us with success. Quality is one that I think can't be compromised, and the one percenters that come with quality really drive the outcome. So, it's critical for us.
So it's not just about building great houses or finishing great projects. Yeah. It's about everything on the back end, from marketing, from messaging, from the team, the one percenters all the way through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we recognise in anything that we do, maintaining that, keeping those one percenters in check is difficult to do. But being aware of it and being reminded of it is a key focus for me in our business. And sometimes when I do get into the weeds, it's because I'm reminding people of how important the one percenters are.
I often think that you will teach somebody how to do something, you'll train somebody how to do a particular role. This is in the business context. Yeah. You teach them to 110% and expect they will tone it down to an 80 to 90.
Yeah.
How do you decide when to push the one percenters and when you can let things slide?
Yeah, God. I commonly use the reference in a building sense. For me, if it was my house, what would I do? And that would drive where I feel the one percenters are important. If it's brand damaging through ignoring some of those one percenters, then that's an absolute no-brainer to make sure it's picked up on. If I think it'll ultimately drive efficiencies or better take-up, then I will always be considering that to make sure that we don't cut corners and we recognise that the default is going back to our processes, which generally take into account the one percenters.
Be interested, not just interesting. What do you mean by this?
Yeah, it's a great one. And as you know, I reference that to a lot of people. My kids specifically is a great one, and then I reflect on some of their friends. I think we all go through life where we come across people who love talking about themselves, and it's quite draining. What I think's interesting about that statement is it's great to be able to talk about yourself and potentially some of your wins and challenges and so on, but it's also great to be a good listener and be able to listen to people talk. So that's the bit about being interesting. I think we get too focused, being interested, we get too focused on being interesting sometimes.
That's probably pretty or prevalent and relevant having adult children now with the whole social media needing to stand out, needing to be polarizing.
Yeah.
Is there any times that you need to tone the kids back? We're talking about adult children as well. They're kind of my age, really.
And as we recognise, you've met certainly one of my adult children. He's 20 now, almost 21. Look, in fairness, for the most part, I haven't, and I'm fortunate in that front. But the kids are reminded of that being an important trait of the person that they are, and I think it goes a long way just to remind them every now and then if they do get caught up in their own self-belief.
Almost taking it to like a family core value.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
It's definitely, we have a number of Merrigan mantras, and that's certainly one of them.
Elaborate, please. The Merrigan mantras.
Oh, interesting. As I was asking some of my family the other day, okay, what are some of my sayings? And God, they quickly reeled off a heap of them, but and some of them are good ones to talk about. I say to them, can't. It shouldn't be a word in the English language. Language is one of them. You're never too old to hug your dad. Again, that's something that's an interesting one, because certainly for me as a generation, that wasn't something that we did when we were younger. It was very much strong handshake, look them in the eye, and that's the way of your greeting, even your mates, let alone your father. And it's only been probably, I must say, in the last 10 years, you'd probably count for it, is, gone are the days where the people that are close to me, is a handshake acceptable. It's almost, if I throw out a handshake now, that they flick me in the face and say, no, come on, the hug is where it's at. And I think that's such a wonderful thing. And with my kids, I've always been mindful that that is super important, to show your love and affection for the people that are closest to you. And I reflect one time in this conversation that I picked up one of my sons from a school camp, and the normal reaction was for him to hug me and even, kiss me on the cheek, which is something that's quite normal for me. And one of his friends said to him later, who doesn't have a close relationship with his father, was how that really shocked him in a positive sense, in the sense that he was very envious of it. And to me, that was enough reason to strike it home, to say they're the reasons why you do it. And it's important, I think, for me to stick with that.
I thought you were going to take that into a student bullying scenario. I thought it was going to have the opposite spin. I suppose it's a testament to the kind of the cohort of or community that your kids grew up in and had their schooling with. First impressions do count.
Yeah. Why? That's an interesting one, and that's certainly a comment that I make. I believe it's important because sometimes in life you only get one chance at it, and when you meet somebody in a sense where you feel it's important, that introduction is, they will remember you from that first time generally. And if you don't make a first impression, a good first impression, then they probably won't give you a second. And if they do, then you're pretty fortunate to be in that place again. So I do think it does come back to, and I reflect again on my wife talking about when she was a chartered accountant in a professional environment. She was breaking grounds because females being accountants weren't necessarily put forward in a proactive manner, and she would always reach out and shake one of the business partners' hands, and some people really took a back seat from that. But to me, and I believe the people that then she subsequently worked with talked how much that made such a strong first impression, that she meant business, and she wasn't just there to fill the room as a female. So there's a couple of little examples, but I think they're really strong reasons to stick to the first impression counts. Steve
Jobs has said, the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Many more say that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. What is the relationship between passion and success?
Yeah, and that's another one quote that I've heard before, and I think it's a ripper because, genuinely, if you are passionate about something, then it's a lot easier to be good at it. And for me, I think passion is another key to success. I've been very fortunate that I did ultimately find my passion, and I say that and I reflect, when I left school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had some great ideas I loved designing stuff. I love being outdoors. But apart from that, there was a sort of a greyness as to where I was going to take it. What I did then ultimately do, which was fortunate, was to tread a path where I ultimately was able to earn some money through working in bars and doing some study, just doing a design course. But I realised that the design side of things was what I was ultimately passionate with. And with that, then I've ultimately been really fortunate to then find a business that enables me to do both, play in the design space, where in the early days for me was scratching house designs on tracing paper, to then now being in a position where we employ 4 architects in our office, and they do all the creative work and I get to do the fun work of marking it up and pretending that I've had a say in it and they've listened to me. And then building for me is the evolvement of a design, and there's, designs are only as good as the creation if they are to be realised and to be built. And so to be able to have the play in the original design, a blank piece of paper, to take it through to something that people live in and it generally changes their life, is a very fortunate business and process to be in, and something that, again, I think you'd be lost if you weren't passionate about that, to see those end results. It's a hard slog sometimes to get there, but the passion ultimately helps to drive what might be perceived to be hard work, but ultimately it's something that I'm committed to, I enjoy, and am fortunate that I've been able to find that space in my professional sense to be successful in.
I think that's a key point that you touched on, that you can be passionate about something, you can be on the journey to doing it, but it's not necessarily fun or enjoyable. It can be difficult. It can be very challenging. It doesn't make you any less passionate about it. One of my favourites from Zig Ziglar is, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. How can we bridge the gap between starting and building a business that thrives?
Yeah, it's interesting to start a business. I think to start a business, to make that ultimate decision is hard. You cross that line and then it becomes harder because you've actually got to make it work. And to bridge that gap, if I reflect on my journey, which is a relatively long journey, and if I could do what we say as we all grow older, if only I could transport myself back in time and know what I know now, the things that I think are vitally important are reaching out to people that have trodden the path that you're wanting to take, and get their advice. Most people will want to help you. And I think by doing that, certainly is a way of fast-tracking that journey for success, and trusting yourself.
From a conceptual standpoint, for the person listening that goes, I do want to reach out to that person, I do want to know what they know, it is a compliment to have somebody from wherever they are in their journey. It's a compliment to have somebody reach out to you and say, give me your advice. Can you help me? Can you shed some light on this scenario? Just whether it's yourself or myself, or whether it's anybody else thinking about reaching out to another person, don't look at it as if you're encroaching on them. It's an area where it's an opportunity for them to share what they've learned as well, you to gain something from them, but they also... People thoroughly enjoy talking about themselves, and they thoroughly enjoy, if you're going to ask the right questions and you're genuinely interested, the giver or the sharer of the information is going to have just as enjoyable experience as the person who learns from it. It is fun. It is really enjoyable.
I couldn't agree more, and I'm involved in different association committees and things like that, and a lot of people shy away from them because of the effort that they need to put into them, and it goes the same way. It's what you put into it will be in some part also what you get out of it, and so that's an example. But again, I wish I'd had the insight to probably be more proactive in my early days of my career, to take on the advice and the interest that I have now to be able to speaking to young women and men who are wanting to get into our industry, that are wanting to get some advice about how to tread that path, how to break into it. And some are just literally kids at school. Others are guys and girls that have started their business and wondering where to from here. And as you touched on, the reality of it is, whilst the short-minded position is, God, do I have the time? I'm tired of sharing all my knowledge. The reality of it is, what you get back from those conversations is equally as good as what you give out. And I've experienced that time and time again. It's something that I would thoroughly encourage any young person to reach out to someone and seek their advice.
Let's shift gears a moment. How do we actually build a legacy brand?
Wow, that's a big question. And I suppose going right back to the beginning, did I start my business career with the idea that I genuinely thought we'd be where we are and probably considered how we are back then? Absolutely not. So whilst I'd love to say it was all planned, it certainly wasn't. But there was a time when we did put some plans. I did put some plans down that ultimately drove to the next phase of the business. And my learnings out of that, and I'll say it to anyone, make a plan, write it down. You could put that plan in your drawer and forget about it, or potentially forget about it. But I think that just by doing that actually instills some strategies in place that drives you to that point. And funnily enough, the first time I did it, I pulled that particular piece of paper. There was nothing professional about it at all, but I wrote some things down 5 years later, and I literally ticked everything on that box that I'd put down 5 years ago, and succeeded most of them as well, exceeded most of them as well. The legacy thing for me is I'd probably even still sit here now. I don't set about creating a legacy in the true sense, but what I have been focused on is creating a business that's bigger than me, and I think that's potentially been the driver that maybe will result in a legacy that goes well beyond me. My thinking behind that is, I've got some great people in our business, now have some business partners that have evolved as the business evolved. They will take the business beyond me, and the people within the business are being promoted in a way that I want them arguably to go beyond my immediate successor, for want of a better description, so that it has a lifeline that's well beyond potentially even the current people in the business. People have talked to me about whether I've created a business that is there for my children to step into, and I've been pretty open to say that the business isn't created for them. They need to be able to knock on the door and knock the door down if they want to have a part to play in it, but the door's not open for them to step into it.
They'll have to apply for the role.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah. And by then bringing people into the business with equity that are external to my family, I just think it gives the business such greater structure and strength to take it well beyond the immediate leaders of the business now. So that's probably a bit about where the legacy is. Driving the brand is part of it, obviously. That's just staying true to who we are, being authentic around us as people, but how we want to be seen as a brand. And as you would know, that's not always easy. You do get tough clients who want to question who you are and your ability and even your ethics, and you've got to really stay true to yourself to try to deliver on those. Sometimes it's not easy at all.
But getting pen to paper on a set of objectives, a plan of sorts, or even just milestones.
Yep.
Goes one level deeper than just shouting affirmations into the mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got far more deeper in that in recent years, where we have some greater structure, we have some greater reporting mechanisms, which is really driving that. Sometimes, to be honest, I find that a little bit frustrating, in the sense that my eyes tend to lift towards the horizon as opposed to get stuck down into the nitty-gritty. But I think to recognise where our successes have come from has been to reflect and to be able to look on some of the detail that we've talked about, whether it be 12 months ago, 6 months ago, or even 5 years ago.
I often talk about the visionary integrator relationship when there's business partners, and that looking to the horizon and constantly not dreaming, but having that visionary mindset is definitely a driving force behind many successful companies.
Yeah,
I've heard you talk about the Urban Habitats messaging to be a focus on rural relationships and a network instead of the call to action style. Help us understand this.
Probably a couple of comments you've made in there. The real relationships, and then obviously the side note of the call to action. Relationships for me is critical in any sense of a business successes. So relationships start with me, with the people that we work with in my business, in our business. It's not just mine, and ensuring that they all share, for the most part, the same values, and that the culture within our office space, if I talk about that for a moment, is a really good high energy culture. I'd like to think that it's a high performing culture, and every now and then I need to remind them that that's what we're aspiring to do when, there's carry on out in the kitchen at lunchtime when everyone's sitting there having a gas bag. But I think picking up on some conversations that you had with one of your previous podcast interviews, I think it was Tim, talked about how you give them a little bit of slack and create a great culture, and hopefully they buy into it and certainly want to elevate what they do for you because they believe in you and what they do. What was the other question that you asked me?
We're talking about we've got the rural relationships, which are the guys, the internal team, the company culture that goes out to clients as well.
Yeah.
There's also the importance of, particularly here in SA and most construction industry pockets, about the network and the importance of kind of the trust, credibility that goes along with that.
Yeah.
But I've heard you say specifically that this is in counter to the call to action style messaging that potentially a lot of people are doing at the moment.
Yeah. So the call to action and the way that we've always worked within the business is not that. The way that we've tried to work is just continued brand awareness, so that ultimately when people are ready to make the decision, they're aware of us. And whilst I think sometimes we've got good traction, I still think we've got so far to go with our business. You've been very kind to reflect on the way that the perception of urban habitats is broadly in the state and the effort that we've made to get some awareness and traction in the state. But there's still people that I'll talk to that, funnily enough, and I laugh because, and I shouldn't, but haven't heard of urban habitats before when we talk in a building sense. And that's the bit that grates on me a bit. How do we get better traction so that I want our name to be somewhat of a household name? And I look at some of my peers, contemporaries in our industry, and you'd be hard-pressed to speak to someone, for example, who wasn't aware of Scott Salisbury Homes as an example. Now, I think they do a great job. Do I want Urban Habitats to be a Scott Salisbury Homes? No, I don't. I want us to stand on our own 2 feet and be our own unique builder in our industry. But I like the way that he's got some great awareness. And again, I don't necessarily think that they drive a lot of call to action. but brand awareness they've done a very good job.
This leads directly into the fake it till you make it type mentality. That is neither good nor bad, it just is. But a lot of newcomers these days in trades, in building, almost anywhere, are generally putting a lot more focus into their social media, their ads, and even their big project showcases.
Yeah.
You're no stranger to a boots on the ground marketing approach though, just as a way of gaining attention. Did you really handwrite letters to get in front of potential clients?
Wow, now you're digging deep. Absolutely, I did. Yeah. But to be reflective on that, email wasn't much of a thing when I started doing that. But you can't underestimate the power of a handwritten letter, even in nowadays. But yes, I did. I started the business. Didn't realise I told you about that, mate.
I have my ways.
And it was literally, that we talked about earlier on in this conversation about that first step of stepping out to be a business owner. And that was the things that I did. I sort of grabbed a database of family and friends, and somewhere between 50 to 100 letters were written, posted out, just advising people of what I was planning on doing. And with that started the first amount of work coming in the door.
With no call to action to it? It was just brand awareness.
No, that's exactly right. Fortunately enough, that soft brand awareness does ultimately create some interest, and then hopefully it does create at some point in time the call to action.
I want to operationalise things a little bit, because annual offsites, quarterly strategy days, monthly KPIs, this is my love language.
Yeah.
And I know you run something really similar. Why have a objective planning process like this?
I think it gets you more focused as a starting point. So me and my, the directors in the business, we get aligned. So that certainly helps. So we become more focused. We become better aligned. We debate things that we're planning on doing. We review the things that we have done, why they haven't worked, why they have worked, and then we are able to reset and go again. But it also is a great way to hold not just the senior leaders to account, but the whole team to account, and in some way, if need be, put some KPIs against it. I'll be frank, I'm not a strong KPI type of person, but I think it's really good to be able to have some milestones to work to, and then appreciate the successes if they do come.
It's taking a measured approach to company growth.
Yeah.
In whichever direction. It's not necessarily growth for growth's sake.
Yep.
What are some pivotal lessons you learned early on?
As a builder, one of the lessons that we're all constantly reminded of is that you can be exposed to large amounts of cash in a building contract that, if not managed correctly, could quickly make you come unstuck because it's not your money. The nature of most building contracts is earlier on they're cash flow positive, and we've all heard the stories of builders who constantly hear these stories of going out and buying the jet ski, the fast car and all that sort of stuff, and then realise that's not their money and they have to pay it back somehow. Understanding that was a really important one. Another one was, for me, understanding what a good, in the early days for me, was an order book. There's reference to now it could be a workflow balance, which is effectively just understanding in a really basic form how much contract work you had on the books at any one time. They were two things that just were really helpful for me to know. That one, understanding whose cash I had at any one time, and whether I could use that in means that enabled me to do some other things, provided that I had my cash flow forecasting established. And then the other part of it is as much to do with ensuring we've got so just a better foresight about where we're going with the work that we've got on our books at any one time. So effectively to say, I know that if I've got, hypothetically, $1 million worth of work left on my order book, that will see me out for this length of time.
Yep. And that then dictates with foresight, when do I need to sell? When do I need to have clients locked in and closed and contracts and everything approved, and to line up your pipeline for the future?
Yeah.
Just something that probably gets left or done on a whim. If things are quite busy, and if you've got a 3-guy gang still, you're migrating from first fix into building.
Yeah.
Probably pretty prevalent to see guys just wondering when the next job's going to start and hoping for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And, having that as a forecast and an understanding, looking out in front, we talked about it, the planning side of things. I think it's really important to constantly look out in front just to see what it's looking like in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, if you're that planned. Beyond that would be fantastic. In a building sense, that's pretty hard to get beyond 12 months. But having that even as some vision is a fantastic way to plan your business.
There are 2 different types of Jock Merrigan, or there was and now there is. Paint me the picture. You have just got your first site supervisor, let's say, so that you've got a good set of subbies. You're delivering, let's say, at circa 2 to 4 homes a year.
Yeah.
The company is moving along and it's moving in the right direction. Yeah. What was your routine like then?
Initially, that if I recall, the first supervisor, I was actually had a home office. We talked about, funnily enough, the home office at your place the other day, and my routine was pretty focused on building and building a business to ensure that there was a constant income stream that I wasn't going to leave myself short. So it would start the day generally through getting up, going and visiting the sites, coming back, estimating, doing data entry, and then probably recapping with the supervisor, meeting with trades, meeting with clients. To be fair, back then, did my day have a great deal of structure? Honestly, no, not that I can recall. The days were driven by the work that I immediately needed to deal with at that particular point in time. So I wish I could say I was a lot more organised back then, but it was sort of like make it happen as it needed to.
It's quite comforting to know that you're not immune to the everyday man.
Yeah.
What about now? What's life like now? How do you keep yourself functioning at such a high level to continue the company moving forward, make time for family, enjoy the richness of life?
Yeah. I must say I think I've always been pretty fortunate in that space where I've always been fairly good with work-life balance, and I know that's a common phrase to be thrown into the mix, and I'll preface work-life balance by it is what you want it to be. And I've probably been more on the side of creating seriously more life balance than work, and I've been really structured around that. So what I mean by that is a couple of the things that were great for me to really set myself up for a stable mental life and work life was to remove the office from the home, and that was obviously one step. And then try to balance in the latter years where I minimised the amount of work that came home. I made sure that exercise was part of my daily routine. So if I'd have a stressful day, I would invariably use going for a run, going for a swim, or doing something just to break that cycle so that I could clear my head. Sleep for me has always been such a positive, important thing as part of what I do on a daily basis. If I don't sleep well, my next day's shot. But then to structure my day now is the office is such a busy environment where I do try to start my day fairly early, grabbing a coffee somewhere out of the office where I plan my day. invariably meetings take up a lot of my days, and I can recall sometimes looking at my diary thinking, wow, what a great week. I've got meetings from end to end. How good am I? And then I'm thinking I've left myself no time to do anything. So I've changed my weekly routine now where, and in the office too, we were having random meetings all through the week, some structured random meetings, and I pulled everyone in and I said, we're going to change that. We're going to have Tuesdays where that's our solid meeting days. So we started 8:30 in the office with meetings that run all the way through till 4:30. And that's varying from a couple of the different businesses that sit under Urban Habitats to construction meetings where we sit and talk about problems, to sales, design leads, those sorts of things. So having that has been a really good way of just making a day a bit more efficient. What it does do, by the end of it, you're exhausted. But I have now, at best, drawn a line through Wednesday in my diary and still working hard with my team to not put things in it. But the idea being is it's a free day where I can catch up. And to be honest, sometimes just look to the horizon and think about opportunities. And that sort of clear space enables that.
I think that's something that it definitely depends on where you're at in your business journey, but having white space in a calendar is almost like a hack or something that you should look positively towards, because it does give the opportunity to pause, and instead of going through your emails and working out what you're going to do, it gives you time to think, time to recalibrate, time to potentially come up with ideas. There's no harm done in using that time to walk around an oval, to learn something new. I've had a few conversations with business owners that are in the kind of $3 to $5 million revenue mark, so they've got a decent team and a good structure behind them, how difficult it is for them to read a paperback book during those kind of times, because it looks as though you are not working.
Yeah.
But if we don't learn and we don't stay ahead of the business, then how can we continue to drive it forward?
Yeah, that's right. And again, you can feel really selfish and really challenged by having a blank space in your diary. And to be frank, I still sit here with a Wednesday where I strike it out, and I feel somewhat guilty about doing that. And I think to myself, that's just me. I've got to get over that, because the positives that it creates for me as a business leader is far outweighs any potential fact that I've got another day full of meetings.
Particularly off the back of a full meeting day.
Correct. Yeah.
Nice to have some cognitive downtime.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've unpacked kind of the work-life balance component. Do you think, and I'm going to frame this hopefully correctly, would you agree with this, that work-life balance only exists on the correct time horizon? That if you want to build something meaningful at the rate at which you want to achieve it, which is usually as fast as possible, then you may need to front load the first 3 to 5 years of work hard to get the life balance on the opposing 3 to 4 years. It can come in surges.
It's a question that I've thought about for many a person. My son is actually having a crack at creating a business at the moment, and he's working 7 days a week, pretty solid on it. I'm very proud of him in what he's doing. My one call on that is, whilst I think that is a great drive, I don't think it's sustainable. And so my preface to what you just said then would be, yep, I understand you've got to do that, but also make sure that if you're working your ring off like that, you need to provide yourself some breaks to just pull out of it every now and then. Otherwise, you'll just kill yourself, in my opinion.
That's probably where pushing back onto the planning component, set yourself milestones or objectives. Once achieved, permission to enjoy reward, whether it's a time reward or a materialistic reward or whatever it is. But planning your life based on objective reward.
Yeah, and celebrate them. Celebrate the milestone, but don't get lost in the end goal. Keep it focused, but also make sure that you do pause every now and then. And I suppose it just comes back to I get the drive and I encourage the drive, but we're a long time dead as well. So, don't just drive yourself into a hole. Make sure you're stopping to appreciate everything that's around you, the people that are around you, and don't be singularly focused, I suppose. That's my opinion, and I realise people will have different opinions on that. But I am a big fan on ensuring that your life is a little bit balanced in those circumstances.
What are you currently learning?
Learning for me is never stopping, really. It's do I focus on specific things? And your question probably in the way that you framed it would suggest that. I honestly feel as though I need to be learning all the time and not necessarily focused on one thing, which maybe is a bit of a flippant comment, but I'm learning from these conversations, honestly. We talked about earlier about meeting with younger people that are wanting to get into the industry. I massively get a kick from meeting with them and learning from them and learning the stuff that they're doing that's quite different to the way that we've done stuff. Side interest is always learning about some other things that I have in my life, which is I have a farming interest, which I generally like learning about that, which is as much about a distraction outside of the business, which I think is healthy for me and healthy for anyone as well. Currently learning and teaching myself to review and question, in some part, everything that we've done in our business from a financial reporting, forecasting sense to question, are we doing it the best way we can? So I'm trying to learn and question new ways about doing that. That's a bit of a focus of mine. Interesting enough, I have recently signed up with effectively a building coaching group who have some really interesting learnings about what they've learned through coaching hundreds of other builders, and they've put that into different levels of modules. One of them, which I'm fascinated with at the moment, is the whole how we can use AI in our lives and in our industry. And if I was to probably hang my hat on anything about where I think there's some great learnings, is how we can better understand and use AI in our business.
I want to poke on the AI. It wasn't a part of my formula for today because I get asked that a lot as well, just being in that kind of business advisory space.
Yeah.
And something that comes up a lot is that just because it can be automated and just because it can be offloaded or outsourced doesn't mean that it should. And I often find people trying to solve problems that don't exist because this is easier. And what I mean by that is recently I was having a conversation with a guy who wasn't inundated by leads, but was attempting to spend his time to automate the sales process. Mm-hmm. My question to him was that would be something that we would look to solve the problem if the problem arose. Mm-hmm. So invest your time into getting more leads, and then we can develop the program, software, AI, tech, whatever stack needs to be there to make that more efficient. Mm-hmm. How do you see a specific AI tool being very useful? Is there something in your mind that you're like, oh, I want to use that and I want to see it come in? Or is it just more under the premise that there's a lot of power here, we're just not sure how we're going to use it?
Yeah, I think nothing specifically at the moment. What I'm really trying to grapple with is how much it can do for us, even to the extent of just helping you write articulate emails, for example, responding to something that might be a difficult email to respond to, that you might spend half an hour trying to make sure the wording's just spot on. My experience so far with AI can really help you just to fast track that pretty quickly. We're doing something in our office today which was about some revisiting on branding, and as we were talking, I was using the AI that I was using, that I used just to drop in some of the questions and statements that were being made and to see what that would pump out. And it was really informative. I think in our industry, what will be interesting to see where it goes is the use of AI and designs of houses, and what that does as we move forward has to be an interesting path to tread.
From a drafting and design perspective.
Yeah. Again, it's interesting in my office. I am certainly the eldest in our office. The average age would be mid-30s, and I'm the one currently reminding them about the opportunities with AI. They're sick and tired of me saying.
Well, that's because you have your Wednesday time to think and to explore and to learn.
Correct. Yeah.
When all's said and done, what's the end goal?
In a business sense, or just JM end goal?
What's your end goal?
Yeah. Gosh, my end goal. I don't have a final plan in place yet, but my end goal is to continually enjoy what I do. I do want to step back from my on the ground day-to-day role within the business in the not too distant future, to empower the guys and girls that are in what we've described as our senior leadership team to step up and drive the business with hopefully some greater vigour than me and perhaps enthusiasm to take it beyond. So be able to let them step up. To do some more developments, which I really like doing, where we get a bit of a free range on both our design ideas, but also what we put in it, how we detail it, do we want to change our mind while we're building it, those sorts of things. We can do all of that and hopefully get a financial reward out of it. Maybe ultimately continue to build a bit more of a land asset, housing asset base beyond my working career. Certainly for me, I touched on it earlier, is I have a side interest in beef cattle farming, so to have some more time there, and probably just be able to enjoy the efforts that we've put into the business and hopefully the profits that it continues to bring.
It's the ultimate test of the model and the business that you've created to be able to step away and watch it grow.
Yeah.
Without you, when in whatever capacity that is, stepping away, or even just relinquishing the final buck stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you define success?
Success for me is ultimately it comes down to you quickly fast forward yourself being on the deathbed and the conversation about would you spend more time at work or with your family, those sorts of things. It then goes further to say who's standing around your bed. Is anyone standing around your bed? And the sad thing, I think, is that those people that define success, and again, everyone's got their own interpretation of success, but dying a lonely person with all the wealth in the bank is not success to me. Success ultimately is having my family and my close friends around me at any point in time, whether it be now or through the future. Having adult children that want to spend time with you. That become not just your friends, but people that you can grow from their learnings. And from a business sense, to be frank, to see the business succeed beyond me would be a great outcome. To see my children be successful and to be able to have and live the choices that I am able to make through having the success, and I suppose in some part the wealth and the finance to be able to enable those choices.
To be able to grow your own beef.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Jock Merrigan, I appreciate you.
Thank you,
Thank
mate.
you very
It's a good
much.
day.